Before we dive into this forgotten tale of the Old West, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and share this story with someone who loves powerful, emotional narratives rooted in truth and mystery. Now, saddle up and get ready to discover how a hardened man, feared by everyone, found redemption in the most unexpected way. This isn't just another Western. It's a story of transformation, of fear turned to love, and of a man who thought he had nothing left to give until fate knocked at his door in the form of a child. A black rancher named Elijah lived far beyond the town's edge, where the desert met the horizon and the silence was broken only by the hooves of his cattle. No one dared step foot on his land. They said he was a ghost of war, a man who'd seen too much blood, too much betrayal. His rifle was always loaded, and his heart always guarded. The locals avoided even saying his name too loud, as if just mentioning him could summon trouble. But Elijah didn't care. He preferred the isolation. It kept people safe from him. Folks in town only spoke of Elijah in whispers. Some claimed he'd once been a Union soldier turned bounty hunter. Others swore he made deals with bandits and Apaches. Whatever the truth was, no one wanted to find out firsthand. They simply avoided the narrow trail that led to his ranch like it was cursed. He had built that life brick by brick, each wall a defense against a world that had never accepted him, not for the color of his skin, nor the choices he'd made to survive. Elijah's ranch wasn't just his home, it was his prison. Day in and day out, he worked the land alone, tending to cattle and fixing fences, saying not a word to anyone for years. He didn't go into town. He didn't speak to the preacher. He didn't even write letters. His only companion was a scarred stallion and the ghosts of his past. There were no celebrations, no visitors, no music. Just the steady rhythm of solitude and the memories that clawed at his sleep every night. Until one dry summer evening, everything changed. The sky was orange with dust and the heat was thick like smoke. That's when he saw her. A tiny figure on the edge of his land, limping through the dirt road. Her clothes were torn, her face covered in dust, and in her hands, nothing but a dirty cloth doll. She looked too fragile to still be breathing, but somehow she kept walking. Elijah didn't know it then, but that moment would redefine the rest of his life. At first, Elijah thought he was hallucinating, a mirage brought on by the heat. But as he got closer, he saw the girl's eyes, wide with fear, but too tired to cry. She didn't speak. She didn't beg. She simply collapsed into his arms, like the world had finally let go of her. And for the first time in years, Elijah felt something shift. Something human stirred beneath the scars, beneath the pain. It was instinct, maybe, or something deeper. Whatever it was, he carried her inside like she was the last piece of a broken puzzle. He laid her on his cot, offered water, and tried to speak gently, though his voice was dry from years of disuse. She was no more than 8 or 9. There were bruises on her arms, scratches on her legs, but it was the silence that unsettled him most. The kind of silence that only comes from trauma. The kind he knew all too well. And in that silence, Elijah saw himself reflected, alone, frightened, surviving on pure instinct. The next morning, she still hadn't said a word. Elijah tried asking questions, tried getting her name. Nothing. So he didn't push. Instead, he made her a bowl of beans, fixed the squeaky window near her bed, and let her rest. Days passed like that, quiet, cautious, distant. But something was changing. Elijah found himself listening for her footsteps, waiting for the sound of breath from the other room. It wasn't just about taking care of a child anymore, it was about remembering he was still alive. For the first time in years, Elijah cooked more than one portion. He swept the dust off the floor. He even found a piece of cloth to make a blanket. The girl didn't smile. She didn't speak. But she stayed. And in her stillness, Elijah began to remember what kindness felt like. He stopped checking his rifle every 10 minutes. He left the door unlatched at night. Without realizing it, he was changing, softening in places that had been hardened by loss and violence. On the fifth day, while Elijah was fixing the barn door, he heard her voice, faint, like the wind. "My name is Sarah," she said. Just that. Nothing else. But it was enough to break the wall that stood between them. Elijah looked at her, nodded, and went back to work, heart pounding. He didn't show it, but that name echoed in his mind all day. Sarah. A name full of life. A name that brought warmth to a place that had known only cold. From that day forward, Sarah began to speak. Little things, here and there. She liked Elijah's horse. She missed her mom. She was scared of thunder. And slowly, Elijah began telling stories, too. Stories of the war. Of his brother. Of the woman he once loved but never saw again. The silence between them became a bridge, not a wall. Each word laid down like a plank, connecting two wounded hearts across generations. Sarah had been running for days, she said. Her wagon had been attacked. She didn't remember how she escaped. Just that she ran, barefoot, following the sun until she saw Elijah's windmill in the distance. She called it a miracle. Elijah called it fate. Neither of them believed in coincidence. Not out there in the wild. Everything had meaning, even the pain, especially the pain. News of a missing girl hadn't reached Elijah, but he knew someone would come looking eventually. Still, he didn't go into town. Not yet. Something told him she needed time, and maybe so did he. So, they stayed. Two wounded souls trying to make sense of a broken world. There was comfort in the routine. Feeding chickens. Brushing the horse. Watching the sun go down side by side. No words needed. At night, Elijah would sit on the porch, smoking his pipe, while Sarah watched the stars. She told him she'd never seen so many. He told her they were like memories, always above us, even when we can't see them. Sarah liked that. She said it made her feel safe. And for once, Elijah felt like he was doing something right. Not as a soldier. Not as a rancher. But as a man, a guardian. But safety in the Old West was a temporary thing. One morning, a rider appeared on the horizon. A marshal. With a poster in hand and eyes full of suspicion. He asked if Elijah had seen a girl. Elijah paused, looked over at the barn where Sarah was hiding, then said, "No. Haven't seen a soul in weeks." His voice was calm, but inside, his chest thundered. He knew what would happen if they took her back too soon. She wasn't ready. And neither was he. The marshal didn't press. Maybe he'd heard the stories. Maybe he just didn't want trouble. But as he rode off, Elijah knew the clock was ticking. Someone else would come. Someone less polite. And if they found Sarah before she was ready, there'd be no going back. So, Elijah began preparing. Not for a fight, but for a choice. A test of who he truly was now, after all the years of hiding. Elijah taught her how to shoot. Not because he wanted her to fight, but because he knew this world didn't spare the weak. She learned quickly. Fast hands. Sharp eyes. But what impressed Elijah most was her courage, the kind you can't fake. The kind born from fire. Each morning began with lessons, and each night ended with quiet conversation. She was healing. And somehow, so was he. For the first time, Elijah stopped counting the days since the war, and started living them. Weeks turned into months. The ranch came alive again. Flowers bloomed near the steps. Chickens clucked in the yard. Sarah laughed, truly laughed, and Elijah felt something inside him thaw. He began writing again. Letters he never sent. But the words were back. He even dusted off the old piano in the barn. The keys were out of tune, but Sarah didn't care. She'd sit and listen to him play, eyes closed, like she could hear the melody of his heart. Then, one morning, Sarah asked a question that stopped him cold. What happened to the woman you loved? Elijah didn't answer right away. He stared at the dirt, at the boots he hadn't polished in years. Then he said, "She died waitin' for me to come home. I never did." Sarah didn't speak. She just placed her hand on his. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything words couldn't express. Sarah didn't just bring light to the ranch. She brought memory. Elijah began recalling things he thought he'd buried. Good things. His mother's cooking. His brother's laugh. The way the sun felt on his face before he learned to fear it. She was more than a guest. She was a mirror. And for the first time, Elijah stopped blaming the world. He started forgiving it. Slowly. Gritting his teeth. But he did. But peace never stays long in the West. One night, distant gunfire echoed from the hills. Elijah rose from his chair, rifle in hand. Sarah followed, her eyes sharp, not scared, ready. A group of riders was headed their way. Torches lit. Voices loud. Something felt wrong. Elijah positioned Sarah behind the barn wall. "Stay there," he said. "Don't move unless I call." She nodded and waited. As the riders approached, Elijah stepped onto the porch. His shadow stretched across the ground, long and unyielding. "State your business," he growled. One of the men dismounted, tall, wide-brimmed hat, weary eyes. He held up a photograph. It was Sarah. Elijah's heart stopped. "We're her family," the man said. "We've been looking for her for months. She's our blood." Sarah stepped forward before Elijah could respond. Her face was unreadable. She looked at the man, then at Elijah. "That's my uncle," she said softly. "They thought I died." The man knelt. His voice cracked. "We never stopped searching, girl." Tears fell. Not just from Sarah, but from Elijah too. He knew this was the moment he'd dreaded. The moment he'd have to let her go. They stayed the night. The uncles. The cousins. They ate Elijah's stew and listened to Sarah retell her journey. Every detail. Every mile she walked. Elijah stayed silent, letting her speak. Proud. But aching. She never once called him father, but she didn't have to. He had become something more. A guardian. A protector. A memory that would never fade. At sunrise, the horses were ready. Sarah's things packed. Elijah stood by the fence, watching. She approached him slowly, the cloth doll still in her hands. "I'll come back," she said. "I promise." Elijah nodded. "You always got a room here, Sarah." They didn't hug. They didn't cry. They just looked at each other. Two souls forever connected by something deeper than words. The ranch was quiet again. The porch creaked under his weight. The chickens pecked without care. But Elijah didn't return to his old ways. He didn't close the windows. He didn't lock the doors. He left them open, just in case. He even planted a rose bush by the front gate. "For Sarah," he muttered, watering it each morning like it was sacred. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Written in shaky handwriting but full of warmth. Sarah told him about her school. Her new dresses. The meals her aunts cooked. But mostly she wrote about the stars. "They don't shine like yours do, Elijah," she wrote. "I miss them. And I miss you." He read that letter every night for a week, folded it gently, and placed it in his chest under the bed. The townspeople noticed the change. Elijah came to the general store again. He nodded at strangers. He even fixed the church's broken fence. Whispers turned to respect. Fear gave way to admiration. "He's not just the black rancher anymore," they said. "He's the man who saved that girl." And with each passing season, Elijah's legend grew, not as a ghost, but as a man reborn. Each year on Sarah's birthday, a rider returned to the ranch, a young woman with fire in her eyes and a braid down her back. She'd stay for a week, sleep in the same bed, and sit on the porch while Elijah played piano. They didn't need to say much. Their silence said everything. She grew older. So did he. But their bond stayed unbroken, as strong as the fences he once built with trembling hands. When Elijah passed, the townspeople gathered for the first time on his land. Sarah gave the eulogy. She spoke of love, of loss, of a man the world feared but she knew as home. They buried him beneath the rose bush, next to the windmill. And every year after, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. Subscribe now for more stories like this, of unsung heroes, forgotten bonds, and the power of love to change even the hardest hearts. Until next time.